A Roman emperor had heated floors, Byzantines fired liquid flame, and Inca engineers hung bridges over abysses. Today, 33 historical firsts that were not first, not original, and definitely not where textbooks start. You will see ancient robots, medieval cameras, and surgery techniques already happening before modern heroes arrived. Stay for number 33, because the so-called scientific method gets a much older backstory. History did not invent clean origin stories. It invented great thieves with better public relations. The first astronomer who was beaten by Babylonian skywatchers. Long before famous Greek astronomers, Babylonian skywatchers were already predicting eclipses with unnerving precision. By around the 8th century BC, priests in Mesopotamia tracked planets from temple rooftops. They worked in Babylon, Uruk, and Nineveh, where night skies meant power. Why did that matter so much? Because kings treated strange eclipses like cosmic warning letters from angry gods. Babylonian scholars recorded Venus cycles, lunar patterns, and planetary movements on clay tablets. Later Greek thinkers inherited parts of that knowledge, then history remembered mostly the Greeks. The Babylonians did not have telescopes, just patience, mathematics, and generations of obsessive record-keeping. So the stars were being read seriously long before astronomy got its classical branding. 2. The first surgeon using tools ancient Indians already described. Modern surgery loves clean origin stories, but ancient India already had surprisingly advanced medical techniques. Around the 6th century BC, Sushruta described surgical tools and procedures in northern India. His work, the Sushruta Samhita, listed scalpels, needles, forceps, and training methods. Students reportedly practiced incisions on vegetables, leather bags, and animal tissues before touching patients. That sounds strangely familiar, right? He described cataract treatment, fracture management, wound care, and detailed forms of nasal reconstruction. This mattered because later civilizations acted like organized surgery suddenly appeared from nowhere. Instead, surgeons in ancient Varanasi were already treating bodies like problems requiring careful systems. The operating room had ancestors, and some of them spoke Sanskrit centuries earlier. 3. The first alarm clock that came centuries after water clocks did it. The idea of waking people automatically is much older than the clanging clock beside your bed. In ancient Greece, engineers built water clocks that measured time with flowing water. Around the 3rd century BC, Ctesibius of Alexandria improved them with remarkable mechanical tricks. His designs could ring bells, drop pebbles, or trigger whistles at preset hours. So yes, someone basically built an alarm clock in Hellenistic Egypt. Later cultures refined clocks with gears and springs, but the basic purpose stayed familiar. You sleep, a machine decides your piece is over, and life resumes immediately. That matters because automation did not start with electricity or cute digital displays. It started with water, pressure, and people already hating oversleeping 2,000 years ago. 4. The first robot that was outdone by ancient Greek automatons. Before modern robots rolled through laboratories, ancient inventors were already making machines move on command. In the 1st century AD, Hero of Alexandria described elaborate mechanical automatons in Egypt. These devices could open temple doors, pour wine, and stage miniature moving performances. No computer chips, obviously. Just steam pressure, falling weights, ropes, pulleys, and maddeningly clever engineering. One setup even made statues seem alive, which must have terrified first-time temple visitors. That matters because people often imagine robotics beginning with 20th century science fiction dreamers. Instead, ancient Mediterranean engineers were already building machines that mimicked purposeful action. The first robots were not electronic brains, but theatrical tricksters powered by physics. 5. The first camera that had medieval Arab science behind it. Photography did not appear from nowhere when 19th century Europe finally captured permanent images. Centuries earlier, Ibn al-Haytham explained how light entered dark rooms through tiny openings. Around the 11th century, in Basra and Cairo, he studied optics with unusual rigor. He described the camera obscura, where outside scenes projected upside down onto interior surfaces. That image was temporary, not a photograph, but the core idea was there. Later inventors added chemistry, lenses, and plates, turning projection into something you could keep. Still, the conceptual breakthrough mattered long before anyone posed stiffly for portraits. Without that understanding of light, the camera's story starts much later and makes less sense. So one path to photography runs through medieval Islamic science, not just Victorian laboratories. 6. The first tank that looked a lot like Leonardo's lost design. The tank became a symbol of modern war, but the idea arrived much earlier. Around 1487, Leonardo da Vinci sketched an armored fighting vehicle in Renaissance Italy. His design looked like a turtle shell packed with cannons and cranked internally. Would it have worked perfectly? Probably not, and some parts seem intentionally flawed or mechanically unrealistic. Still, the concept was unmistakable: mobile armor, enclosed crew, and heavy firepower together. Centuries later, Britain fielded tanks during World War I on the Western Front. Those machines were practical in ways Leonardo's sketch never fully became. But the imagination behind armored land warfare was already crawling across paper in Milan. 7. The first rocket weapon that China had already fired. Rocket warfare did not begin when modern armies industrialized explosives and long-range weapon systems. In Song Dynasty China, engineers were already attaching gunpowder propulsion to military projectiles. By the 13th century, fire arrows and early rocket weapons appeared in Chinese conflicts. These were not sleek missiles. They were bamboo, paper, flames, and a terrifying amount of experimental chemistry. During Mongol-era wars, Chinese arsenals developed increasingly sophisticated gunpowder devices for battlefield use. That matters because later rocket traditions often get framed as purely modern technological leaps. Instead, soldiers in medieval China were already hearing the hiss of propelled weapons. The skies started launching back centuries before rocketry got its polished scientific reputation. 8. The first flamethrower that Byzantium basically invented. Few battlefield inventions feel more terrifying than a weapon that throws burning liquid. Yet Byzantium was doing something alarmingly similar in the 7th century AD. During wars against Arab fleets, the Eastern Romans deployed the infamous Greek fire. It burned on water, which sounds unfair because it absolutely was. Engineers mounted siphon devices on ships and blasted enemies at close range. The exact formula remains disputed, adding mystery to an already nightmare-inducing weapon. Sailors facing Byzantine dromons were not watching fireworks. They were watching panic spread instantly. That matters because later flamethrowers looked modern, but the fear behind them was ancient. Someone weaponized liquid fire early, and the Mediterranean remembered the lesson brutally. 9. The first machine gun that had ancient precursors in repeating weapons. Rapid-fire weapons seem like an industrial-age invention, all metal, smoke, and relentless repetition. But centuries earlier, inventors were already chasing the dream of repeated mechanical firing. In ancient China, military engineers developed repeating crossbows that could launch bolts quickly. The famous later version, linked with Zhuge Liang, became part history and part legend. It was weaker than single-shot crossbows, but speed changed battlefield pressure dramatically. You traded power for repetition, which is a very modern-sounding military compromise. Later, Europe created organ guns and volley weapons before true machine guns emerged. That matters because the desire for sustained fire did not suddenly appear in factories. Armies wanted faster killing long before cartridges and belts made it horrifyingly efficient. 10. The first factory system that borrowed tricks from ancient workshops. Industrial factories changed the world, but organized mass production has deeper roots than people admit. In ancient Rome, large workshops produced pottery, textiles, metal goods, and standardized military equipment. At places like Arretium, potters made terra sigillata ware at impressive commercial scale. Workers divided tasks, repeated steps, and chased consistency across huge batches. That already sounds suspiciously close to factory logic. State arsenals and shipyards in other ancient empires used similar labor organization. The Industrial Revolution added steam power, stricter timing, and far bigger output. But the underlying idea, break labor into repeatable stages, was already old. Humans figured out scalable production long before smokestacks became the poster image. 11. The first skyscraper that came after Roman high-rises. The skyscraper is usually framed as a Steel Age American miracle of engineering ambition. But ancient Rome already built surprisingly tall apartment blocks called insulae. By the early imperial period, some rose several stories above packed city streets. Writers complained about them constantly. They were crowded, fire-prone, noisy, and exactly what booming urban life tends to produce. Rome eventually imposed height limits because these buildings could become dangerous quickly. No, they were not modern skyscrapers with elevators and steel skeletons. But vertical urban living did not begin in Chicago after everyone discovered ambition. Long before skyline bragging rights, Romans were already stacking neighbors alarmingly high. 12. The first public hospital that Islamic cities had long before Europe. The hospital did not suddenly become organized when Europe finally got around to systematizing care. Islamic cities were running sophisticated public hospitals centuries earlier across the medieval world. By the 8th and 9th centuries, Beemaristans operated in places like Dimashq and Baghdad. They treated patients, taught medicine, and separated wards by illness and need. That structure matters because it feels strikingly modern. Some hospitals offered pharmacies, libraries, and music for recovery, which is honestly impressive. The famous Al-Mansuri Hospital opened in Cairo in 1284 with major resources. Europe later built important institutions too, but not from an empty starting point. Public medicine already had large, organized precedents long before many people imagined. 13. The first university that was not Europe's to claim. Europe loves claiming the first university, but that story gets complicated very quickly. In 859, Fatima al-Fihri founded Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez, in present-day Morocco. It began as a mosque and teaching center, then grew into a major institution. Students there studied law, grammar, theology, astronomy, and other advanced subjects. So what counts as a university exactly? That debate lets people quietly move the goalposts whenever Europe wants the trophy. Later, Bologna became central to the European university model, especially for legal study. But organized higher learning, with enduring institutional life, already existed beyond Europe's borders. The classroom has an older, wider map than many textbook timelines suggest. 14. The first encyclopedia that ancient Rome had already compiled. The dream of gathering all human knowledge into one place is older than modern reference books. In the 1st century AD, Pliny the Elder compiled his enormous natural history. Written in Rome, it covered astronomy, zoology, art, geography, medicine, and stranger topics. Pliny was ambitious to the point of danger. He reportedly died during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79. His encyclopedia was not always accurate, but its scale was genuinely staggering. Later encyclopedias became more systematic, but the urge to catalog everything was already roaring. That matters because information hoarding did not start with printing or internet age anxiety. Someone in imperial Rome was already trying to summarize the world before breakfast. 15. The first postal system that Persia built at imperial scale. Fast communication feels modern until you realize ancient empires depended on it too. The Persian Empire under Cyrus, and later Darius, built an impressive relay courier network. By the 5th century BC, riders moved messages across the royal road astonishingly fast. Herodotus admired them for good reason. Fresh horses waited at stations, letting messages travel without constant exhausting delays. That system helped rule enormous territories stretching across much of the ancient Near East. Later postal networks improved administration elsewhere, but Persia proved imperial messaging could scale. It mattered because armies, taxes, and authority move better when information moves quickly. The mail was ancient state power wearing dust and riding hard. 16. The first census that governments were running thousands of years earlier. Counting people sounds bureaucratic and boring until you realize empires depended on it. Long before modern states loved paperwork, ancient rulers already counted households and taxable populations. Egyptians tracked labor and resources, while Romans later formalized famous recurring censuses. But even earlier Mesopotamian administrations monitored land, workers, and agricultural output carefully. Why bother with all that counting? Because rulers wanted taxes, soldiers, labor obligations, and proof someone owed something. Censuses were not abstract statistics. They were political tools with immediate consequences. That matters today because governments still count populations for power, money, and control. The spreadsheet's ancestor was probably a clay tablet with someone's obligations on it. 17. The first welfare state that borrowed from ancient grain doles. Public support programs feel modern, but Rome was already feeding citizens through state distribution. By the late Roman Republic, grain doles helped many residents of the capital survive. Politicians like Gaius Gracchus tied food access directly to social stability and power. That arrangement was not charity. It was governance, crowd management, and political survival mixed into one policy. Later emperors expanded distributions to include bread and sometimes other public benefits. If Rome's urban masses were hungry, unrest could arrive frighteningly fast. That matters because welfare systems did not appear from pure modern compassion alone. Ancient governments already knew hungry citizens become dangerous long before they become grateful. 18. The first passport system that existed before modern nations. Passports feel tied to airports and border control, but travel documents are much older. In the ancient Persian world, official messages mention protected travel under royal authority. Biblical and later imperial examples suggest rulers issued letters granting safe passage. Those documents were not passports exactly, but they served a similar purpose: identify someone and reduce problems during travel. Medieval states later expanded such practices as diplomacy and trade became more complex. By then, the basic logic was already obvious to rulers everywhere. A piece of official writing could move a traveler through suspicious territory more safely. Modern border stamps look newer, but permission on paper has very old bones. 19. The first newspaper that arrived long after Roman news bulletins. Daily news did not begin when printing presses finally started feeding urban curiosity. In ancient Rome, officials posted the Acta Diurna in public spaces. By the 1st century BC, these notices covered legal actions, announcements, and political happenings. Think of them as a state bulletin board with serious gossip potential. Citizens could read updates in the forum, where information mixed instantly with rumor. Later printed newspapers widened audiences dramatically, especially in early modern Europe. But the appetite for regularly updated public news was already alive in Rome. That matters because information culture existed before ink hit cheap paper at scale. People have always wanted updates, scandal, and official drama before lunch. 20. The first stock exchange that had earlier merchant precursors. Modern finance loves declaring birth moments, but markets usually evolve through messy stages. Before formal stock exchanges, merchants already traded shares, debts, and partnership interests widely. Medieval Italian cities and later Antwerp built sophisticated commercial environments for such dealings. Then Amsterdam, in the early 17th century, became the famous landmark case. The Dutch East India Company turned tradable shares into something much more recognizable. Crowds gathered, speculation surged, and familiar financial madness started looking institutional. Still, markets do not appear magically the day historians name a building. They grow from merchants inventing ways to divide risk and chase profit. The exchange floor had ancestors arguing over contracts long before finance got marble facades. 21. The first banking network that medieval Italy didn't truly start. James Banking Network. International banking did not simply burst into existence when Italian merchant families got rich. Long before the Medici, complex financial practices linked distant regions through trust and records. Ancient temples stored wealth, while merchants across Eurasia moved credit through networks. In the Islamic world, trade instruments and partnerships expanded across vast distances. That mattered because hauling silver everywhere was slow, risky, and deeply inconvenient. Italian bankers later refined bookkeeping, transfers, and multinational finance in famous ways. But the deeper story starts earlier, with many cultures solving the same problem. How do you move value without moving tons of metal? That question built banking long before Florence became its glamorous poster city. 22. The first check payment that Islamicate trade used centuries earlier. Writing payment instead of carrying coins feels modern until medieval merchants enter the conversation. Across the medieval Islamic world, traders used instruments called sak to transfer value. The word itself helped give English the word check centuries later. A merchant in Baghdad could authorize payment elsewhere through trusted commercial networks. That was enormously useful because robbery loved bulky silver. These instruments supported long-distance trade across regions tied by law, faith, and commerce. Later, Europe developed checks within its own banking traditions and legal structures. But the idea of paper-based payment backed by trust was already functioning earlier. Finance often pretends to invent itself every century, which is almost adorable. 23. The first insurance system that merchants already practiced in antiquity. Insurance sounds modern and mathematical, but merchants hated uncertainty long before actuaries existed. Ancient traders spread risk through shared cargo ventures and bottomry-style maritime loans. In these arrangements, repayment depended on whether ships survived dangerous voyages. That is basically commerce staring disaster directly in the face. If the ship sank, losses shifted according to agreed rules already in place. Greek and Roman merchants used such practices because storms ignored optimism completely. Later insurers turned risk into a formal industry with tables and premiums. But the core impulse was ancient: survive catastrophe without losing everything at once. Someone always finds a way to price fear once trade gets expensive enough. 24. The first suspension bridge that ancient engineers beat by centuries. Suspension bridges look like modern elegance, but mountain cultures solved that challenge earlier. In the Andes, Inca engineers built suspended rope bridges across terrifying deep gorges. By the 15th century, these bridges connected the empire's road system across Peru. They used woven plant fibers, renewed regularly by local communities. That maintenance ritual mattered because the bridges literally carried imperial communication and movement. Spanish chroniclers were stunned by crossings that looked impossible from a European perspective. Later metal suspension bridges transformed engineering, scale, and durability beyond recognition. Still, the basic idea, hang a bridge and trust tension, was already working. Long before steel cables, the Andes were already teaching gravity some manners. 25. The first concrete revolution that the Romans already pulled off. Modern concrete reshaped cities, but Rome already built with astonishingly durable formulas. Roman engineers mixed lime, volcanic ash, and aggregate into powerful marine-capable concrete. By the 1st century BC, harbors, domes, and monumental structures used. The Pantheon still makes that point embarrassingly clear. Its giant dome has survived for nearly 2,000 years in central Rome. Researchers still study why some Roman concrete performed so well over time. Modern cement enabled mass urbanization, but durability is not always a straight-line story. The Romans were not dabbling, they were engineering at empire scale. Sometimes the future looks advanced until the past refuses to crumble. 26. The first central heating that was old news in ancient Korea and Rome. Comfortable heated floors seem luxurious now, but ancient people already understood that pleasure. In Korea, the ondol system warmed rooms by channeling heat beneath stone floors. Versions existed very early and became a defining feature of Korean domestic architecture. Meanwhile, Romans used hypocaust systems in baths and elite buildings. Hot air moved under floors and through walls in carefully designed spaces. That was not cozy magic. It was engineering, fuel, labor, and serious concern for indoor comfort. Later heating systems became more convenient and widespread, especially with modern fuels. But warm floors were making winters bearable long before thermostats entered human life. 27. The first sewer system that lost to Bronze Age cities. Urban sanitation did not suddenly become civilized when modern cities finally dug underground pipes. At Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, the Indus Valley civilization built remarkable drainage systems. Around the 3rd millennium BC, many houses connected to covered street drains. That level of planning still surprises people. Bathrooms, brick channels, and wastewater management appeared with striking urban consistency. Elsewhere, ancient cities also managed drainage, but the Indus example feels especially systematic. Later sewer networks expanded vastly in scale and engineering sophistication. Still, the instinct to hide filth underground is incredibly ancient and understandable. Nobody needed modernity to realize sewage belongs somewhere else immediately. 28. The first indoor plumbing that ancient palaces already mastered. Turning a faucet feels modern until ancient palaces start showing off their plumbing. On Bronze Age Crete, Minoan sites like Knossos had advanced water systems. By around 1700 BC, some structures used terracotta pipes and drainage networks. Archaeologists found bathrooms that look weirdly familiar at first glance. There were basins, channels, and carefully planned water movement through complex buildings. Later Romans expanded plumbing famously with aqueducts, baths, and urban distribution. But indoor water management did not begin when Rome arrived dramatically on stage. Palace societies were already moving water with surprising sophistication much earlier. The bathroom has a longer family tree than most people want to imagine. 29. The first toothbrush that was late to the party. Dental hygiene did not begin when someone stuck bristles on a modern handle. Ancient people cleaned teeth using chew sticks, twigs, powders, and rough fibrous tools. In many regions, these methods appeared centuries or even millennia before modern brushes. The Chinese later developed bristle brushes from hog hair and bone handles. That looks much closer to what people recognize today. Still, the impulse was old because bad teeth have always been miserable. Egyptians, Romans, and others experimented with powders that sound both clever and alarming. Later toothbrushes standardized the form, but not the desire to scrub. Nobody needed a pharmacy aisle to understand the mouth can become hostile. 30. The first toothpaste that ancient Egyptians had already mixed. Modern toothpaste tubes look reassuringly scientific, but old civilizations were already mixing dental pastes. Ancient Egyptian recipes reportedly used ingredients like powdered rock salt and mint-like elements. Some formulas also included pepper, ashes, or crushed materials that sound aggressively unpleasant. Would you want that in your mouth? Probably not, but the goal was familiar: clean teeth and freshen breath. Later Greeks and Romans used different powders, some bordering on tiny polishing compounds. Medieval and modern mixtures gradually became safer, smoother, and much less abrasive. Still, the concept of brushing with a prepared cleaning substance is ancient. The tube changed, but the struggle against gross breath stayed timeless. 31. The first prosthetic limb that was beaten by ancient craftsmanship. Assistive devices feel modern until archaeology uncovers someone already adapting to bodily loss. One famous ancient example comes from Egypt, where a prosthetic toe was found. Dating to around the 1st millennium BC, it likely helped with walking stability. That is not just symbolic funerary decoration. Wear patterns suggest practical use, which makes the object even more remarkable. Another ancient prosthetic leg, the Capua leg, came from Roman Italy. These devices mattered because mobility changes dignity, work, and daily survival immediately. Long before modern prosthetics, people were already engineering ways back into movement. Necessity has always been inventive, especially when the body suddenly changes. 32. The first plastic surgery that ancient India described in detail. Reconstructive surgery became famous much later, but ancient India had already described it carefully. The Sushruta Samhita included techniques for rebuilding damaged noses using skin flaps. Restoring a nose was not vanity. It could restore social standing, appearance, and ordinary human life after severe trauma. European observers later became fascinated by Indian rhinoplasty methods in the 18th century. Those reports helped influence modern plastic surgery's later development. But the deeper roots stretch back much earlier than many surgical origin stories admit. Repairing faces is an old human problem, and skilled surgeons tackled it early. 33. The first blood transfusion that followed earlier experimental attempts. Blood transfusion became life-saving medicine only after a long stretch of grim trial and error. In the 17th century, European experimenters tried transferring blood between animals and humans. Some of those attempts went badly, which is putting it politely. The real breakthrough required understanding blood types in the 20th century. Karl Landsteiner's work made transfusion safer by explaining catastrophic incompatibility reactions. Before that, people were guessing with horrifying confidence and very uneven results. Earlier myths about blood as life essence also shaped dangerous enthusiasm. That matters because medicine often advances through partial success, confusion, and delayed explanation. The procedure became revolutionary only after science finally understood what blood differences meant.